Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. It's Patron Week once again, and this month we've gotten a theme I'm surprised I haven't talked about sooner. For someone who has a whole Duel Terminal Lore series, which you should totally check out by the way after this, I've covered surprisingly few members of the early chapters. I'm flush with videos about Necros, Ritual Beasts, and Infernoids, which is now, less than comprehensive, thanks Evil, but as far as early themes go, I've got Ice Barrier and Fabled. Oh, and Naturia. So today, we're gonna fix that by talking about one of my favorite archetypes from that era. Premiering in the, the first X-Sabers physically released in the TCG in the June 2009 5D starter deck, had an update in the September 2009 core set Ancient Prophecy, but had its original series of cards released in the Hidden Arsenal side pack in November 2009. What a journey. X-Sabers are one of the original 4 tribes of the Duel Terminal storyline, who join forces with the Mist Valley, Ice Barrier, and Flamvels to repel the Worms and Fabled, though not always on the best of terms. But out of all 4 of these, X-Sabers would arguably see the most competitive success. And with new Duel Terminal support just over the horizon, I'm more than willing to tempt fate if it means we get to find out what the next evolution of X-Sabers might be. So, let's take stock of all our equipment, see how our various martial styles complement each other, then see if there are any roaming warriors that would like to join our merry band. Sharpen your blades and don your armor, because it's time for X-Sabers Explained. So, what's the deal with X-Sabers? Well, they're a series of earth monsters that bridge a variety of types. Beasts, warriors, and beast warriors do make up the majority of our team, but we've also got reptiles and an insect, so basically, if you're good with a sword, there's a good chance they'll let you join. The initial wave of X-Sabers were a mixed bag when it came to effects, not really having a strong, coherent game plan, though it did have a tuner that resisted battle destruction, and sometimes that was more than enough time to stall to actually capitalize on a synchro. The next wave, the double X-Sabers, would hit the scene with a variety of effects that complemented the synchro part of the synchro strategy, and any stranger off-brand effects did more to actually help you win the game. Essentially, you spit out a whole bunch of monsters, use their effects to get you more cards, and leverage that into powerful synchros with strong effects and great stat lines. So, now that you know the general idea, let's start covering those monsters. Heads up, we are going to mix together the X-Sabers and the double X-Sabers, since the distinction is more of a thematic one than a mechanical one, as all cards that support X-Sabers also support the doubled variant. First up is X-Saber Axel, a level 1 Beast Warrior monster with 400 attack and 100 defense, and while you control this face-up card, when a Saber monster is destroyed by battle and sent to the grave, draw a card. That's kinda cool. You get to recoup the costs of your X-Sabers so you don't fall behind in card economy. But even back then, this was untenable in practice. Like, unless you had any kind of attack redirection effect, spoilers, there are none in this theme, your opponent can just run over Axel first to curb its effect, and it otherwise does nothing. There's a funny FTK you can pull off with this and another monster we'll mention in just a bit, and a funny quirk of this card is that it doesn't check to see whose Saber monster is destroyed by battle. So if you're in the mirror, which isn't likely, or you give your opponent a monster, which is a bit more likely, you still get the draw. So it's not entirely without merit, it's just a shame that they didn't include any creature swap style effects to take advantage of this. But you might be noticing right now that it doesn't say it triggers off of X-Sabers being destroyed by battle, but Saber monsters. Mechanically, this means there are a smattering of other monsters that this works with, including the entire Element Saber line, but if you're curious about why that is, I would just keep those questions to yourself. They don't really appreciate it when people axle them anything. X-Saber Palamuro is a level 1 reptile tuner monster with 200 attack and 300 defense, and when another Saber monster you control is destroyed by battle and sent to the grave, you can pay 500 life points to special summon this card from your grave. That's not a bad trade. 500 life points gets you a monster to replace one that's been bodied, and if you have another Palamuro in grave, you can actually loop these over and over again as long as you have the life points to pay for it. That interaction is actually the backbone of that Axel FTK, because then you'll keep drawing cards until you get Exodia or some other kind of win condition. And if you have something like Rainbow Life active at the time, you actually might net life points if the opposing monster you run the Palamuro into is sufficiently large. But that's really the only utility this card has. For regular play, relying on an effect that triggers on battle destruction isn't a good idea, and just getting back a tuner that doesn't do anything is pretty low impact, especially if you're on your opponent's turn. Basically, if you're playing a cheesy version of X-Sabers, this is going to be the card you want to see the most. If you're playing something a bit more conventional, you probably aren't going to want to pal around with Palamuro. Double X-Saber Ragigura is a level 1 Beast Warrior. No way, a Beast Warrior? Anyway, they've got 200 attack and 1000 defense, and when this card is normal or special summoned, you can add an X-Saber monster from your grave to your hand. And that's great! Recycling a card on summon works really well for us because we have some sweet cards we can utilize from the hand, so anything that summons this out, especially for free, is gonna really help our lines of play. And this isn't once per turn either, so if you can send this away as material for something like a Synchro or a Link play, this is loaded up to help you out again. It's a really hard-working chameleon, both in terms of its actual mechanical effect and in terms of its camouflage. I mean, it's so good that we're all mistaking it for a Beast Warrior. I still cannot get over that. X-Saber Pashul is a level 2 warrior tuner monster with 100 attack and 0 defense, and this card cannot be destroyed by battle. During each of your opponent's standby phases, you take 1000 damage, but you must control this face-up defense position monster to activate and resolve this effect. So you can set this on your turn, and if it gets attacked, it'll get flipped up, but will be totally fine. And you still won't have to deal with any downsides until your opponent's next turn, and hopefully by that point you'll have found some material to turn this into a Synchro. It's actually such a solid card that it sometimes sees play today, though only as a single copy, and partly because it's your only level 2 tuner. It's a bit of a garnet, but a tough one at that. It takes a special kind of stubborn to have 0 defense and still be immune to battle destruction. Very Chad move. X-Saber Airbellum is a level 3 beast tuner monster with 1600 attack and 200 defense, and if this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent by a direct attack, discard a random card from your opponent's hand. Now, this is probably the most infamous of the X-Sabers, if not within its own theme, then without. Level 3 tuners are already pretty snazzy, and not only does this one come with a solid attack stat and a nifty effect when relevant, it's a target for the cutest starter in the game, Rescue Cat, and that makes this card an absolute legend. You could tech this into synchro decks that run low-level non-tuner beasts and toolbox out some really wacky stuff. And because you could summon Rescue Cat right out of your deck with Summoner Monk, it and any random spell meant you had access to this at the drop of a hat. And as the game progressed, you could just summon 2 Airbellums to make a rank 3. Not to mention that, with Pre-Errata Rescue Cat, if your opponent had an open field, you were taking 2 cards out of their hand before you even had to commit to an extra deck play, and that was absolutely backbreaking. Even post-Rescue Cat Errata, all this does is keep you from doing the hand rip. Everything else is totally accessible. This is another solid, early X-Saber that can still put in a lot of work. And that's why this is one of the all-stars, bub. Double X-Saber Dark Soul is a level 3 beast monster with 100 attack and defense, and during the end phase, if this card was sent from your side of the field to the grave this turn, you can add an X-Saber monster from your deck to your hand. Speaking of awesome Rescue Cat targets, this one plus Airbellum is a quick and easy level 6 synchro that gets you a little extra bonus during the end phase to get you some gas for your next turn. And because it's not once per turn, the more Dark Souls you can get onto your field, then send to the grave, that's even more searches. But be warned, because you don't want to fall into the trap of early rulings regarding this card. See, for a little bit after its release, it was understood that this effect would activate the second it hit the graveyard and would leave a lingering trigger that would resolve during the end phase. What that means is that you could take a single Dark Soul, revive it with a multitude of effects, keep sending it to the grave for other kinds of summons, and each time you would do that, it would get you a new search during the end phase off of a single copy, but that is not the case. It's less like Metalfoes Bismugear and more like Skarm Malebranche of the Burning Abyss. It has to go there, and it has to stay there until the end phase for the effect to go off before you get any value out of it. Though if you do get 2 separate Dark Souls onto the field and send both to the graveyard, those will both activate independently because the effect isn't once per turn. It's one of the great foibled ruling stories in Yu-Gi-Oh! And really shows that this game can be a little wonky from time to time. And it's also a lesson that it actually takes quite a bit of training to learn the ropes of judging so you can get good. Double X-Saber Emmer's Blade is a level 3 insect monster with 1300 attack and 800 defense, and when this card is destroyed by a battle and sent to the grave, you can special summon a level 4 or lower X-Saber monster from your deck. Pretty good floater for the time, forcing your opponent to use effect removal to keep you from summoning a banquet of good options, but nowadays it's pretty underwhelming. If its floating effect triggered on any kind of destruction, we'd be singing a different tune. So, instead of wallowing in that knowledge, I'd instead like to let you know that I was today years old when I found out that Emmer's Blade actually has has its own pair of hands holding reverse grip blades, and did not in fact just have big scyther arms. The things we learn when we gain access to higher quality art. Double X-Saber Full Helm Knight is a level 3 warrior tuner monster with 1300 attack and 1000 defense, and when an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can target the attacking monster and negate the attack. But this effect can only be used once while this card is face up on the field, and if it destroys an opponent's defense position monster by battle, you can target a level 4 or lower X-Saber monster in your grave and special summon it. This is another cool occupant of the level 3 tuner slot, giving you a way to divert a big attack once before this leaves the field, either by being used as material or finally kicking the bucket. And while not as explosive as Arabellum and their Rescue Cat shenanigans, it is still nominally searchable with reinforcement of the army when needed. The recursion effect is also nice and does come up from time to time, but isn't the easiest to utilize on a 3200 point body. But when it does go off, boy does it go off. It may only have its niche usages, but instead of being pessimistic, I'd like to think of this as more of a glass half full Helm Knight situation. X-Saber Anu Piranha is a level 4 warrior normal monster with 1800 attack and 1100 defense. A female X-Saber warrior known for her graceful attack and calm decision making in battle. Her ambition is merciless and strikes fear into the hearts of her enemies. This gives the deck a rescue rabbit target, and if you need a normal monster for any other newfangled effect that tries to use non-effect monsters as requirements, you've got her ready to go. Other than that, there isn't much to talk about here. Great stat line, awesome art, and is co-president of the Ivy from Soul Calibur Appreciation Club, alongside Full Helm Knight. X-Saber Galahad is a level 4 Repto warrior monster. Really? We're doing this again? Okay, it's got 1800 attack and 800 defense, and if this card attacks an opponent's monster, this card gains 300 attack during the damage step only. And if this card is attacked by an opponent's monster, this card loses 500 attack during the damage step only. And if this card is selected as an attack target, you contribute another Saber monster to negate the attack. Man, I am so glad we're done with this card design. Like, I'm okay when things gain attack when they're attacking, it's kinda cool, but I feel like the punishment for it being attacked should just be that it has to deal with its base stats. Making them worse just means the written stat line is useless and confusing. Though this is the only one I can think of that has a way to stop the attack to avoid that drawback, though tributing another Saber monster feels like a real Pyrrhic victory. You better be getting rid of a Dark Soul for this, otherwise you're not exactly walking away from this smelling like roses. And don't make a habit of doing that either, because eventually its teammates are gonna up and leave, cause they'll have Galahad enough of its garbage. X-Saber Uruz is a level 4 Beast Warrior monster with 1600 attack and 1000 defense, and when this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the grave, you contribute this card to return the destroyed monster to the top of its owner's deck. This is not good, like, at all. If it sent a monster directly to the top of the deck instead of going to the grave, that would be one thing. But if that monster you destroy has an effect that immediately triggers on hitting the grave, this isn't going to help stop it, because this doesn't replace going to the grave. It's just an extra step. In most other circumstances, sure, getting the opportunity to seal your opponent's top deck, potentially making it brick, could have some applications, but this gives up too much in too narrow a situation to be considered playable. This is also another X-Saber who feels like its type isn't really in sync with its design. If I didn't know any better, I would say this is a warrior. If you wanted to sell the beast angle, I would have called this something like X-Saber Uwooz. Double X-Saber Bogart Knight is a level 4 Beast Warrior monster with 1900 attack and 1000 defense, and when this card is normal summoned, you can special summon a level 4 or lower X-Saber monster from your hand. And Bogart Knight cannot be used as synchro material except for the synchro summon of an X-Saber synchro monster. Thankfully, that's not too bad because we've got some absolute bangers. Summon either a level 1, 2, or 3 X-Saber tuner and you've got some good options to choose from. And while Bogart Knight is restricted, what you summon is not, so you can use it for whatever you want. And because this card wasn't future-proofed, this can also help you get out rank 4 monsters in a pinch. It's very helpful in starting up your plays, and potentially has even more dual terminal multiversal lore implications, because this bears a striking resemblance to one of Kaiba's signature normal monsters, Vorse Raider. They share the same level, type, and attack stat, but notably Vorse Raider is dark in attribute and has 1200 defense, so it's not a perfect one-to-one. And when it comes to tying together cards via mechanics, I am looking for everything to line up, or if there is a discrepancy, for there to be a good reason for it. Y'all can hash this one out in the comments, but personally, I'm going to use this as my personal excuse to confirm that the dual terminal cabinets are in fact in lore built by Kaiba Corp, and some data from Kaiba's favorite cards gets leaked in and gets a little remixed. And yes, this does mean that the 3 Ice Barrier dragons are the 3 Blue Eyes White dragons, obviously. Double X-Saber Garsum is a level 4 beast monster with 1400 attack and 400 defense, and when this card on the field is destroyed and sent to the grave by a card effect, you can add an X-Saber monster from your deck to your hand. And this card gains 200 attack for each face-up X-Saber monster you control. That includes itself, so it's usually at least going to be 1600, and with some friends, can become a pretty decent body pretty quickly. Its floating effect is also nice because it can be destroyed by anything, but it does miss the mark a bit because it can miss timing. So if that Torrential Tribute gets flipped Chain Link 2 or higher, you can kiss that card advantage goodbye. Don't worry though, Garsum, we'll get you all fired up and have your code updated because I know Soulblazer just got back 2 copies of his favorite starter and needs some help filling out those slots. Double X-Saber Guard Strike is a level 5 Beast Warrior monster with 2100 attack and 1400 defense, and if you have 2 or more X-Saber monsters in your grave and you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. This makes for a nifty tool to rebuild your board past turn 1. During your first turn, you're likely to have a vacant grave, and any attempts to build your board are going to put monsters on it. But if your field gets tanked, Guard Strike is here to put up a fairly large body without taking up your normal summon, giving you plenty of options after that. Heck, you can even search this with a Dark Soul when you don't have any better targets as insurance, so you don't even have to play a lot of these to help you avoid bricking. It's a pretty good card as long as you take care of it, because you certainly wouldn't want to let your Guard Strike down, would you? Commander Gotham's Sword Master is a level 6 Beast Warrior monster with 2100 attack and 1600 defense, and while on the field, all face-up Saber monsters you control gain 400 attack. Now, you may notice that there's a distinct lack of X-Saber in this card's name. Well, as we foretold all the way back in X-Saber Axle and repeatedly had shown in a variety of monsters, Saber is what older cards in the theme usually use to denote their companions. This was an odd choice here, and because this isn't name stamped, this Gotham's doesn't work with our powerful support cards. But what's even funnier is that a future piece of support will name drop Gotham's, which means that we're technically covering 2 archetypes in this video. So I hope you all enjoyed the bonus Gotham's Explained. Because this card isn't officially an X-Saber, despite being their freakin leader of all things, this card sees absolutely zero play, which bites because nowadays a level 6 on theme body that's easy to summon would open up so many combos that it would make your head spin. For now, we're just gonna have to wait here and chill until Gotham's next appearance. Until then, we've got plenty of video to tide us over, and you can even pick up that Gotham's X Mist Valley Thunderlord fic you've been meaning to finish. They really do make a perfect pair, huh? Double X-Saber Full Troll is a level 6 warrior monster with 2400 attack and 1800 defense that can't be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned from your hand by controlling 2 or more face-up X-Saber monsters, and cannot be special summoned by other ways. And once per turn, you can target a level 4 or lower X-Saber monster in your grave and special summon it. Okay, for real, this card was the big reason to play the deck, bar none. With our swarming capabilities, this was almost trivial to summon, and was only a soft once per turn, so multiple Full Trolls could recycle your material during the same turn to help extend your synchro plays, and worked absurdly well with Ragi Gura, letting you use Full Troll as synchro material, then getting it back to hand with Ragi Gura. And Ragi plus the potential X-Saber synchro monster you made means you have 2 X-Sabers, meaning you can summon it again to get even more value. There is even a potential Telephon-esque amount of link material at hand here. If you have 2 Full Trolls in rotation, you can link Ragi Gura and 1 Full Troll into, well, anything, then use that remaining Full Troll's effect to summon back the Ragi Gura, getting you back the Full Troll. Then you special summon the one you just got, link off the Full Troll that's already used its effect and that Ragi Gura, and then repeat the process ad infinitum until you've got like a million U-links. It is, without a doubt, one of the most important cards in the theme, back then and now, and any X-Saber deck worth its salt is going to utilize this to its maximum potential. And I mean, it's also got a giant laser sword. It's perfect! Alright, our main deck has been accounted for, and now it's time for that sweet extra deck roster. X-Saber Wayne is a level 5 warrior monster with 2100 attack and 400 defense, requiring generic material. And when this card is synchro summoned, you can special summon a level 4 or lower warrior monster from your hand. This is an odd choice because X-Sabers are not a mono-type deck. On theme, our only targets are Pashul, Full Helm Knight, Anu Piranha, and Galahad, and of those, you're likely only playing the tuners. And there is something to be said for a synchro that can get more material on board. Full Helm Knight plus Wayne must be a sick Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, and I suppose you can just keep Wayne in the extra on the off chance you have a valid target in hand, and choose to go into another level 5 as appropriate, but it just leaves so much on the table that it's hard to justify keeping it as the 15th slot, with so many other utility cards available for the extra. That being said, this does see usage from time to time in general warrior decks, because if their levels are low to the ground, you're a lot less likely to have an inappropriate hand for that effect, and will be built specifically to help extend its lines of play. So it's nice to see that it has a home, but for the life of me, I can't explain why it has to be so specific, even with lore reasoning, because like, ice barriers are also big on multi-typing, so this effect is just confusing in general. Double X-Saber Hyunlei is a level 6 warrior monster with 2300 attack and 1300 defense, requiring a tuner and one or more X-Saber non-tuner monsters as material. And when this card is synchro summoned, you can select and destroy up to 3 speller trap cards on the field. That's right, you've got a mini Harpy's Feather Duster in your extra deck. And unless your opponent has committed more than 3 back row to the board, there isn't much of a difference. From there, it's just a nicely statted body that could be used as a jumping off point for other synchros, and that's just fine by me. In an era where back row removal was key, this monster was a big help with either dispatching problematic battle traps or baiting out summon negation, and can even fulfill those kinds of roles today, as it never really went out of style. Much like Hyunlei's actual style. I like the double X-Saber orbs on the helmet that look like little hair buns. That was a really neat touch. X-Saber Souza is a level 7 warrior monster with 2500 attack and 1600 defense, requiring a tuner and one or more non-tuner X-Saber monsters as material. It can tribute an X-Saber monster, then choose one of the following effects, which it gains until the end of the turn. Either at the start of the damage step, if this card battles an opponent's monster, destroy that monster, or this card cannot be destroyed by trap effects. While this won't help against something like Torrential Tribute, you've got some protection against Mirror Force, or you essentially get to trade one of your X-Sabers for one of your opponent's monsters, with the extra step of Souza showing them a little bit of that dual sword action. Hey, slow down there, Kirito. There's enough fodder here for everyone. And because it's not once per turn, if you have enough bodies for it, you could potentially get both. Souza is the previous leader of the X-Sabers, sacrificing their ranks to achieve victory, which is pretty successfully conveyed in the effect. Thankfully, they've been deposed, with Gotham's taking the reins, but now I've got to ask the question that's on everybody's mind: why'd they give Souza the same hairdo as Ichigo's dad from Bleach? Like, he wasn't perfect, I'll grant you that, but I don't think he was that bad, come on. X-Saber Urbellum is a level 7 warrior monster with 2200 attack and 1300 defense, requiring generic material. When this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent while they have 4 or more cards in their hand, place a random card from their hand on top of their deck. That's right, you can effectively make your opponent skip their draw phase. Unless they have some kind of quick effect to rearrange the cards in their deck, they're stuck with what they've got. And even if they can do that, you might end up putting a card they really need on top, so they'll have little choice but to let it resolve in full. While not quite as popular nowadays, as the level 7 synchro pool has positively exploded with options, Urbellum was played in just about every deck as a way to get a decently sized monster with an effect that could really solidify you as the Titan of tempo during a game. It's quite adept at making your opponent go, what the bellum? Double X-Saber Gotham's is a level 9 Beast Warrior monster with 3100 attack and 2600 defense, requiring a tuner and one or more Earth monsters as material. And it can tribute an X-Saber monster to discard a random card from your opponent's hand. Here they are, folks, Gotham's premier X-Saber debut. While not prevalent in all formats, Gotham sees play every once in a while when synchro monsters are cheap and easy to make as a way to punish the designers for their hubris. See, it doesn't exclude itself like some other effects might do, so you don't even have to commit to playing X-Sabers to get that hand rip. You can just send Gotham's away to loop a card out of your opponent's hand, and if you can revive it, that's another card you get to tear away. And in the case of actual X-Saber decks, where Full Troll can keep feeding this cards, the win condition quickly turns from massive attack to option limiting at the drop of a hat. But still, that's not even the wildest part about this card. Yeah, I bet y'all thought I was gonna forget about this one. While this is no longer a unique factor anymore, thanks Manadium, Double X-Saber Gotham's was the first monster that had a material requirement that did not require non-tuner monsters as material. Cause that second part doesn't denote that they have to be non-tuner Earths, just Earths. You could essentially have 3 Airbellums on field and send all of them away as synchro material for this card. It's kind of funny. Mechanically, all it really means is that you have more variations on how you can summon this, but it does lend a kind of game-breaking energy that we love to see in our big bosses. And if you're able to rip apart an opponent's hand with this, you'll have really got him. That's most of our extra deck offerings, but we've actually got Xyz to add courtesy of the second Duel Terminal age. X-Saber Invoker is a rank 3 warrior Xyz monster with 1600 attack and 500 defense, requiring any 2 level 3 monsters as material. Once per turn, you can detach a material from this card to special summon a level 4 Earth Warrior or Beast Warrior monster from your deck in defense position, but destroy it during the end phase. But more likely than not, you'll have folded it into a summon by that point. Yeah, this card is bonkers. Having recently been brought back to a single copy in Master Duel, having been at one in the OCG for quite some time, and still rightfully banned in the TCG after the latest list at time of recording, once a critical mass of level 4 Earth Warriors and or Beast Warriors become available, you cannot escape this card. It was a key piece in Zodiacs for any opener that had Speedroid Terror Top, as it was a 1-card rank 3 that didn't take up any resources and didn't lock you out of anything. From there, you could summon Rat Pierre, and the rest was history. And this is a card that only gets better as time goes on. I mean, I could regale you with all the different ways you could use this to access powerful cards, but Jaxel actually already handled that over on the Curry Bandit, so have fun plumbing the depths of this outrageous card in your digital format. But hey, Maxi is still legal over there, so I don't even know if this will make a dent in the power creep. Alright, that's all of our monsters. Now it's time for the spells and traps. Saber Slash is a normal spell card that destroys a number of face-up cards on the field equal to the number of face-up attack position X-Saber monsters you control. That's right, the Swarming deck also comes with a way to leverage those numbers into hard removal. Granted, you have to destroy cards equal to the number of attack position X-Sabers you have. You are not allowed to go under that amount, so you'll need to at least make sure your field isn't too big so you don't start hitting your own cards. But with that taken care of, you've got a way to deal with floodgates, field spells, and monsters in general. It takes a bit of setup, but even at its worst, it's still a non-targeting 1-for-1. It's such good value, I'd almost forget that this card has the widespread dud in it for some reason. Canon event, or part of a duel taking place between actual duelists. You decide! Gothem's Second Call is a normal spell card that's absolutely hilarious to talk about now using my usual ordering system. If you control an X-Saber Synchro monster, you can target 2 X-Saber monsters in your grave and special summon both targets, ignoring summoning conditions, but change their attacks to 0, also destroy them during the end phase. You can only activate 1 Gotham Second Call per turn, and you can't conduct your battle phase the turn you activate this card. This card is clearly trying to emulate its normal trap card counterpart, which we'll see about in just a bit. That one is very, very powerful. This one is very, very situational. You need to have already set up a synchro to even use this, potentially gets you into another synchro by combining the 2 monsters you summon, but takes away your ability to win the game that turn because you can't battle. And if you're not hand looping, then that's your only win condition. Granted, this does give you 2 fresh bodies to tribute for the Gotham's loop, but with all the graveyard effects floating around nowadays, it's not quite as prevalent. Like, what if you run into a Dark World player? Wouldn't that be embarrassing? It's an interesting card to use as a last-ditch effort, but honestly, I would cut it from my list without a second thought. Saber Reflection is a quick play spell card that you can activate when you take battle or effect damage while you control an X-Saber monster. You gain life points equal to the damage you took, and if you do, inflict the same amount of damage to your opponent. Then you can add a Saber Speller Trap card or a Gotham's card from your deck to your hand. See, I told you we were getting into the Gotham's deck today. Saber Reflection is interesting because it is potentially pretty powerful, effectively making your opponent take all the damage from a battle, which can get a little out of hand from something like Ragi Gura. You also even have a built-in way to enable this in the form of Pishul, because it doesn't lose you life points, it actually damages you, so you give your opponent the penalty for having that tuner. Heck, it even makes the idea of playing Emmer's Blade a little more enticing, because now you can run it into your opponent, get the float, and then Amazon a Swordswoman them for massive damage. And then it just replaces itself, which is kinda goofy. Granted, our search targets for this card are pretty narrow, and even in that pool, not a lot works very well, but it can search another Saber Reflection to use on another turn, and that's really funny. If you expect to be pelted with effect damage in any given meta, this might not be a bad idea to help keep that damage at bay and maybe snipe a win or two. Who knows, you might even get them to reflect on their choice of deck. Sword of Sparkles is an equipped spell card that can only be equipped to an X-Saber monster. If it destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can destroy a card your opponent controls, and you contribute a monster you control to return this card from your grave to the top of your deck. So once you establish a big body, you can bedazzle it to double up on the destruction, which isn't a terrible proposition, especially if you can keep this up turn after turn. The problem is, actually doing that. Equipped spells are notorious for being great ways to get 2-for-1'd by your opponent, and that isn't a great place to be at. that, especially since it isn't getting you any immediate value, like most modern equip spell designs are going to do. There is a way to get this back, but having to draw it after paying such a hefty cost feels pretty bad. Though honestly, I'm surprised that this hasn't made its way into some kind of warrior list that uses E-Soul to bin this card as a way to tribute off a monster to get it into the grave to get its effect in there or something like that. I wonder what kind of deck would need to be made to sparkle that kind of innovation. Saber Vault is a field spell card that boosts each X-Saber monster's attack on the field by 100 for each of its levels, but also reduces its defense by the same amount. This can turn monsters like double X-Saber Gothams into a 4,000 attack monster, Airbellum goes up to a nifty 1,900, Full Helm Knight gets a respectable 1,600 to help with its effect, and the already fantastic Fall Troll goes up to 3,000. These are some pretty substantial boosts, I don't want to underplay that. It just needs to be on a card that does more. If we get future support, I'd hope that it puts X-Saber Vault into play while accomplishing other tasks, not unlike the new Fire King Sanctuary that gets Island into play. But as it stands, it's not much more than a fancy version of those attribute field spells that increase attack while debuffing defense, which I just don't think is a very safe choice. At One with the Sword is a normal trap card that you can only activate if the only monster you control is a face-up X-Saber monster. Equip this card to it, it gains 800 attack, and if it destroys an opponent's monster by a battle, you draw a card. This certainly gives Sword of Sparkles a run for its money. Thankfully, despite the activation condition, once you've got it equipped, you can summon as many monsters as you want and still keep the equip. That being said, that condition does make it pretty unwieldy, which is ironic all things considered, and would otherwise make a great addition to the theme. Like, it's basically Horn of the Phantom Beast, but on a theme that's actually good. I know being attuned to your sword is kind of like a trope, but this is a team-based strategy. Shouldn't it be that it takes 2 to tango? Or 3 is a crowd? Gotham's Emergency Call is a normal trap card that you can activate if a face-up X-Saber monster is on the field. Target 2 X-Saber monsters in any grave and special summon both to your side of the field. Now, this is a fantastic piece of support, or at least it was when the game was slower. Now, this might end up choking your plans a bit, but it's still got that big nostalgia factor. As long as you have a single on-theme monster, this will triple that number without any caveats like negating their effects or limiting your phases or any tomfoolery like that. It was also a maddening card in the mirror match, because not only did it check to see if there was an X-Saber anywhere on the field, meaning that establishing a board could enable your opponent's cards, it could summon X-Sabers from any graveyard so the opponent could benefit from your setup, though they would be discouraged from summoning any Dark Souls because the owner would still reap the benefits. This card by itself can save a game by granting you a plethora of options, and if you were on the beatdown, could easily solidify a win. Now that's what I call a great piece of support. Saber Hole is a counter trap card that you can only activate when you control a face-up X-Saber monster, and it negates the summon of a monster and destroys it. Now, it does only hit summons, not effects that summon, so things like Monster Reborn don't get hit by Saber Hole. That being said, the kind of summon being negated here is not being specific. This means you can hit any kind of inherent summon. We're talking Lynx, Synchros, Xyz, things like Cyber Dragon, and also normal summons. That's right, we don't talk about it very often because cards like these, namely Solemn Strike, specify that they work on special summons, but not here. Normal summoning, and to a lesser extent flip summoning, are also kinds of inherent summons, and Saber Hole is here to escort them right back off the field. Going first, this is a pretty outrageous way to end plays on the spot. Going second, it's a little less effective, which is why it probably doesn't see quite as much play nowadays. Still, when it works, it really works, taking Horn of Heaven and amping it up to 11. Forget Showing Hole. X-Sabers have turned the Hole into an autonomous weapon of war that pulls cards from one dimension and teleports them to another. So in this episode of how Duel Terminal and Albaz lore are connected, I'd like to clarify. Alright, so that's all the X-Saber cards, but what do we do with them? Well, our game plan hasn't really changed much since their most successful appearance. We call our soldiers to arms, combine them into synchro monsters, sprinkle in a few relevant Lynx and Xyzes as needed, then rush down our opponent for game. It's almost simplistic in its design, but with half a decade since their latest piece of support, it's gonna be an uphill battle to fight against the power creep. So what can we play to help them out? Despite not having the last member of the Tri-types in X-Sabers, Tri-Brigade can be a huge boon to the theme. On top of just being a great great resource engine, they help you access a number of link monsters that can help you establish or break a board, like Shrag or Ancient Warriors Double Dragon Lords. But they also give you a very nifty non-tuner. Rescue Cat is still going to be a phenomenal card for the deck, and by using it, you can summon the level 3 tuner Airbellum and the level 2 non-tuner Karas to make Naturia Beast, still one of the best synchros ever printed, limited only by their need for Earth monsters as material, which the all-Earth deck is more than happy to provide with a little help from the Tri-Brigade. Oh, and quick aside, while we're on the subject of Naturias, Rescue Cat can summon Dark Soul instead of Karas, and that gets you Barkion to help you with that Labyrinth matchup. Speaking of Tri-types, Fire Formation Tenki and Tensu are pretty nice. While it won't work with most of our deck, they do give a search and or extra summon to Ragigura and Bogart Knight, which can help you extend your plays even further beyond. Earth isn't exactly the most exciting attribute, but outside of Naturia, does it give us any unique options? Well, the G-Golem links aren't too shabby. Stubborn Men here can help recycle your X-Sabers, and both Invalid Dolmen and Dignified Trillathon are pretty savage. And with all our Earth tuners, Goyo Guardian is very easy to make here. But I think the biggest boost you're gonna get is from Vernisylphs. While they do lock out any non-Earth options when using their effects, thus limiting your extra deck toolboxing, their ability to buy back material and threaten massive Earth monsters is unparalleled, and Vera is still ridiculously powerful even before you reach that 5 Earth monster threshold. Gigantes has utility as both a level 4 extender and as a heavy storm substitute. Sure, it has to be destroyed by a battle to trigger that effect, which kinda blows, but its use as a way to help you access your extra deck for relatively free is hard to pass up. Because it's also an Earth, Kashtira Fenrir fits our theme quite nicely while not clashing with our Earth sub-themes. Not only does it provide a strong body and effect, its high level is very helpful when it comes to summoning out bigger synchros. Pair Fenrir with our abundance of good level 3 tuners, and that gets you access to whatever generic level 10 synchro you want. Reinforced Truth is a pretty funny way to deploy Pishul, and if you use it during your opponent's turn, you don't even have to worry about the no battle phase restriction. As for a silly tech pick, and I can't believe they're showing up again, Visas Starfrost. The way their summon effect works, you can pop a Garsom and still get the search. True, the deck has some warriors that conflict with this summoning effect, but you don't really want to be popping those anyway. And now you can use this giant tuner to help make your bigger synchros, or better yet, help you cross over into a different theme. By linking Visas into Scareclaw Lightheart, you can add Primitive Planet Reichphobia from your deck to your hand, search out a Scareclaw, and begin getting that engine online. And because the Scareclaws are primarily Earth, they fit with that overall theming, and because they're primarily beasts, you can summon some with Rescue Cat and banish them for your Tri-Brigade effects. It's almost too cool not to use. Alright, now that I've covered everything I can think of in regards to X-Sabers, how does it stand up to the Nova scale? Novelty. By the time X-Sabers had hit their stride, monster spamming strategies had actually been around for quite some time. Blackwing, Six Samurai, and to a lesser archetypal extent Plant Synchro had really pushed the envelope, meaning X-Sabers were following the example of others rather than being a trendsetter. However, they did iterate on this by being more resilient, having access to strong searching and recursion tools, giving them a relatively stronger grind game. It didn't reinvent the wheel, but did its part in shaping what modern Synchro, and really most extra deck monster-focused combo themes, would look like. So X-Sabers get a 2 on novelty from me. Objectivity. At the time, X-Sabers were lauded for their power, but today, they're pretty tame. They function just about like every other monster combo deck, just with some outdated design principles. Hyunlei was good in a game where trap cards were strong, but largely situational, but try to use this against a Labyrinth board and they'll just flip them all up immediately to get that value now rather than later. Summon a Naturia Beast and your opponent might have the Imperm. New support might change this, but as it stands, at time of recording, you don't have to worry about X-Sabers ruining your local meta, so they get a 5 in objectivity from me. Versatility. As mentioned previously, X-Sabers have seen and still see play in a variety of decks that the designers decided they would keep bringing up. Airbellum is still one of the preferred summon targets off of Rescue Cat and lends itself to great synchro and Xyz plays. Invoker, during the times it's legal, splashes into any theme that has easy access to rank 3s, but also wants to summon a level 4 Earth Warrior or Beast Warrior, which is a surprisingly robust pool. And we of course cannot forget Gotham Shenanigans. X-Sabers can also incorporate a number of cards from other themes, so it's not exactly a one-way street. With that in mind, while it's not going to find its way into every top deck ever played, it's well positioned to show up at a moment's notice, so X-Sabers get a 4 in versatility from me. Awesomeness. This is probably the nostalgia talking, but that's what this section is all about. X-Sabers have a phenomenal aesthetic, powerful combos, and while their contributions to the story basically ended at age 1.0, they did a great job of setting things up for future generations, so X-Sabers get a big 5 in awesomeness from me, landing X-Sabers a 16 on the Nova scale. And that's all I have to say about X-Sabers. This is easily one of my favorite themes out of the early Duel Terminal story. It's powerful, looks great, has a cool story, it basically hits all the sweet spots that you want an archetype to hit. And honestly, if this video becomes outdated due to new Duel Terminal support, I'll be nothing but elated to know that our warriors of truth and justice are being given another chance to take the field. And based on the kinds of cards the other themes are getting, I'm sure it'll be nothing less than X-Exceptional. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Do you think that X-Sabers are as excellent as I do, or do you feel that they would be better off extinct? And which one's your favorite? I know this might come out of left field, but Axel's design is actually pretty neat, and there's something about his doofy, slanted face that I just can't help but love. Let me know in the comments, and if you haven't already, please make sure to like this video, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and share this video with somebody you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode was brought to you in part by Dragon Shield. When you want to protect your cards with the power of dragon scales, get some sweet lore for them, and support the channel, check out my link in the description to get started. Today's episode is also brought to you by my lovely patrons, including the illustrious Quasar Commander Green Knight, Nebula Navigator's 3rd Dynasty, Ada Basilisk, Adam Zajdel, Andrew Newman, Avi Chali, Kane Senpai, Chibi Gohan, Christopher Fuss, Clockswork, Danny Bound, Dark Dragon X830, Eric, Aaron the World Breaker, Frankie, Garland Chaos, Genesis Yukio, Great Big Pillock, Hairbear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Howling Zangetsu, Hydrocraft 135, Iron Zero, Iskander 711, Mana Charge, Marion James E. Bacata, Marluxia Zagirl, Mega Combi, Molly Renata, Nathan Vig, Orozco 09096, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, RJ the Jank Monarch, Sammy Haim, Sir Knight JCB, Skybuster Leo, Sophie, apparently, The Wizard Moose and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders Almento 5010, A Random Pup, Ariel Kersey, Beluga Masta, Blue Gem, Chaz Ghost, Corbinisms, Drachenwald, Drake and SpongeBob be like, you used to call me on your shell phone, Dripfed Tar, Eki Bullock, Eva Padilla, Hike Boyagian, Herbal D, Inblink, Jester Designs, Kale the Dragon, Carp, Kevon Public, King Scarlet Yu-Gi-Oh!, Lemon Yu-Gi-Oh!, Lord Whoop-De-Doo, Manga Pages, Matt Simmons, Michael Shimabukuro, Nitromo, Ruxith Sarani, Shizuka Nijimura, Stephen Williamson, The Legendary Raven, Tucker Ordorn, Venusian Teapot, and Zeldreka, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. If you'd like to be a part of these credits, get early access to videos, determine what videos I make, and many more benefits, it would mean the world to me if you check my Patreon page in the description or consider joining as a YouTube member. And if you'd like to see more about the history of these daring cards, make sure to check out my series, The Living Lore of the Duel Terminal. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.